Hey, good evening. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. I am Dr. Douglas Ham. I'm excited to be with you this evening. We are going to get into Revelation 21. Why is that exciting? Well, because Revelation 21, right, is talking about heaven, the New Jerusalem. It's kind of the prize that many of us were told about as we were coming into the faith, as we were growing up. We've sung a ton of songs about, you know, up there, but by and by, and all this different stuff. Revelation 21 and 22 are the place where we get to read about the streets of gold and this beautiful city that God has prepared. It's so much. And it's going to take a little while to get through it because it's pretty dense stuff. It's really amazing. And so I'm excited to jump in with my amazing co host, Scott. So this is going to be wonderful. Hey, my friend, it's great to see you.
You as well.
Awesome. Very good. Well, I think we should get into it right away, 'cause this is an
Okay.
amazing time going through the Word. And man, we made it to Revelation 21, and we've been going through this book for a while, and I'm excited. This is
Yeah. Very little blood drawn on the journey.
yeah, that's true. We had definitely had some differences, and that's okay. You know, um, I thought about it so many times. Like when I was a pre-tribber, like, oh, I can't believe these people. They don't see the pre-trib rapture, but we'll just say told you so on the way up. But I mean, it was kind of funny at the time, but nobody's going to care. And I realize that so many of the disputes that we think are just absolutely critical. We're not going to care at all when we're actually there. We're going to be like, yeah, so I guess what we can do, the best we can do is do our research. We can explain our position. We can defend it with love and grace. And after that, okay, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. I mean, there's just certain things like even like like coming up on Passover. I've got friends that are not dogmatic, but they believe that Yeshua rose on first fruits. I personally believe he rose on Shabbat and then ascended on first fruits, fulfilling it. You know what? We're quibbling over literally 5 or 10 minutes potentially.
Yeah, it's
So I
about
mean,
5 or 10 minutes. Yeah,
but again, we're both in alignment that he fulfilled first fruits on first fruits as
yeah,
opposed to a man-made holiday. So again, we're in 99% unity, and there's just those are things that are good to have discussions about.
yeah, yeah. That's what Midrash is for.
Hmm.
And well, that's kind of why we're here. So let's jump into it. Let's cruise on over to Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Well, I mean, right there, we have a ton of stuff that's going on. I remember reading this in my younger years, and I was like, well, there you go. Like this is kind of it. But then, as I continued studying the Bible, of course, I realized there were other passages that were speaking of the new heavens and the new earth. And then I continued studying even more, and I discovered more passages. And it was about that time when those other passages, and I started putting all of them together, it started to undermine my dispensational model that I had been taught. And that was kind of a scary place because I kind of liked the dispensational model. It was fun and friendly, and I was part of the team. And then I just kept seeing these scriptures, and I thought I can't ignore these. I remember I was living in Southern California at the time. I was sitting in my garage. It's kind of what you do in Southern Cal. You open your garage door and you just sit there and watch the cars go by. And I was meditating on this. And so I went over to Isaiah 65, and I had been teaching through Isaiah, and I kept trying to think, okay, how in the world do I reconcile these things? Because look right here. Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered nor come to mind, speaking of all the former troubles that he just mentioned. And he says, be glad in what I rejoice. And then he says, no more shall it be an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his days. For the young man shall die at 100, and the sinner 100 years shall be accursed. I thought, wait a second. You've got a new heavens and a new earth, and yet you still have the possibility of death. So of course I go and look at some of the commentaries, and I think I went to Albert Barnes, and I could not believe what Mr. Barnes was telling us. He was saying, well, clearly Isaiah was confused because he was mixing these two when he really shouldn't have been. And I'm like, are you serious? You're telling me
that's the best you have?
You're telling me
you don't have anything better than that?
Yeah, God is speaking through the prophet, and you're telling me that Isaiah is confused. That is some hubris right there.
Well,
that is hubris.
That is an example of trying to take a round peg, and you're going to hammer that round peg into that square object, and you're like, I'm going to make this fit. I don't care how I do it. And that's the dispensational model. They have to ignore a lot of scripture, and they claim to be literalists, Doug, but they're not. They're literal when it comes to Judah, but they're not literal at all when it comes to the northern kingdom of Israel.
Right. That's well.
They are very not literal.
Yeah, they're very selective.
Well, they mesh them together. And you've seen this. We've talked about it. Like Walford, he had the New Jerusalem sort of like the Death Star, but it was sort of like the Jerusalem Star hovering around, because you can't have the church ever on earth, because we're a heavenly people. And so, only the Jews were the earthly people. And so, we're going to go hang. It's been years since I've read Walford, but it's separation theology.
Yes.
I'm borrowing from my friend Curtis Reed. It's a house forever divided. It's two different groups that are forever separated in it, because they can't.
That is at the heart of dispensational theology. Charles Ryrie, who wrote Biblical Theology, and I used to teach from that book, and of course I would teach the eschatological part of it as well. He is on record in some of his books saying that the division between Israel and the church will forever be there. They will forever be two different entities, two different destinies. And I'm just like, wow, I really thought God came to do away with the separation, put us all back together, but apparently not. So it's pretty sad.
Again, and he wasn't a dum-dum. I had some of his books. When I say had, they were officially all burned about 8 years ago. I wasn't even going to donate them, because I didn't want, once I saw this, I didn't want anybody being infected by these books. So.
I hear you. Well, so what this does then, let's go to a few more passages, because, scripture is beautiful when we can take it and synthesize it so that we can get a better picture. And this is one of the texts that I remember very distinctly meditating on this passage, because I'm like, wait a second, if Paul is saying this and Isaiah is saying that and John is saying this, how do I put all these things together? Paul says, the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. So when are the sons of God going to be revealed? Well, at the second coming, at the resurrection, when we get our new bodies. I mean, the older we get, the more excited we get about those new bodies, right? And he says, creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For the whole creation has been groaning after the pains of childbirth until now. Not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. All right. So when we get our new bodies, that happens at the resurrection, at the second coming of Christ. Okay. So that's immediately following the tribulation. That's when Jesus comes back and we have Armageddon and all that jazz. that is when we get our new bodies. And according to Paul, that is when the creation that has been longing to be liberated from the bondage of corruption, that is when creation is going to be freed, because it's been looking for the revealing of the sons of God. Wow.
Yeah, we're picking on dispensationalism, but I will say this: they understand that there will be a next stage, a millennium. They just were not able to reconcile how God's going to multitask. So verses are amillennial Roman Catholic, post millennial people who've just taken the millennium and essentially ripped Revelation 20 out of the Bible, ripped these chapters, out of the Bible for the most part, and they just don't know what to do with them. This gathering of Judah and Israel, the two sticks coming together. Yeshua reigning in Zion. They don't know what to do with those passages, because there's really nothing in the apostolic writings or Revelation or the Gospels that teach that. It teaches the exact opposite in Revelation 26 times. It teaches it, and so that's an example of and again, both of them, their fundamental flaw. I believe we agree 100% on this. The fundamental flaw of both of the systematic theologies that are taught in 99.99% of Christian cemetery schools is that the church is a new entity.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start out with that there's this new entity called the church, then everything you can't make sense of Genesis through Revelation. Then you're trying to pick and choose, ignore what this says,
Yep.
allegorize it away, spiritualize it away, because I'm really worried if we're coming up on the end of the age. I'm worried for our dispensational brothers, because they're gonna be very, very disappointed when they're still here on the earth.
Yeah. And
let me finish. I'm also very, very concerned for the Amil people that are looking for the church to take over for Yeshua. In other words, they're set up for a deception, and these little seasoners are set up for a deception that they might believe the lie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your theology and your eschatology, and if you're not even looking for anything, you could be deceived. Or if you've not studied the prophets, you could easily be deceived. Little season theory is exhibit A for how easy it is for people to go off on these rabbit trails and get deceived.
Sadly, right? Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's all going to work out. We know that, but there definitely could be some fallout along the way. There's no question about that. Well, okay, so verse 1. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. All right, there's still a whole lot more we can talk about here. All right, so the first heaven and the first earth. So what's this going to look like? Is God going to take a bunch of dynamite and blow up planet Earth and then poof, create a brand new Earth? Or is it going to be in some way restored? And that's what I think this is what Paul's getting at in Romans 8 that we just saw, that this creation is longing to be liberated from the bondage of corruption. It's a huge difference. And from what I remember when I was a dispensationalist, it was this idea that he's going to take a bunch of dynamite, blow this thing up, and then he's going to start over with something completely new. But that's not what Scripture is telling us. It's telling us that, God is in the business of restoration. I mean, that's just what he does. He takes things that are broken and he makes them as if they're new. He takes, he can give beauty for ashes, right? He takes those ashes and he makes something out of them. He can take things that are broken and restore them. That's the amazing part about God, is he He restores. So it's going to be the same planet Earth, the same one that we're walking on today, the same one that we fly over today, that we take boats on today. But the difference is the corruption, the element of entropy that is in everything. It's in everything, right? It's in your car, it's in the trees, it's in the grass, it's in our bodies, right? It's definitely in our bodies. We all
Get,
sense that.
get
Yeah.
older and you understand entropy a lot better.
Yeah. It's in your house so that's falling apart. Anytime something breaks and you got to fix it, that's entropy. That's the second law of thermodynamics. That is what scripture calls the law of death. That's it. And so this law of death that infuses literally everything. And scientists talk about the heat death of the universe, that given enough tens of billions or hundreds of billions of years, eventually the last star will flicker out. There'll be no more energy left, and we'll have the heat death of the universe. But that's because we're on basically battery power right now. And God is going to plug us back in. He's going to plug us back into the source. And so we have that beautiful thing to look forward to in our King, which is pretty awesome. So the new heavens and the new earth, this is where Jesus restores it. Now, again, if you guys have been listening to me for any time, and I think Scott is on the same page now, which is pretty cool. The new heavens and earth, look, when is this going to happen? Let's go over to 2 Peter 3:10. I think he tells us right there.
Well, and I used to wrestle with this passage, but when you start understanding that that day is
Yeah.
1,000 years,
Uh-huh.
then it's, you no longer have to ignore what the text says.
Yeah. Well, and look, the day of the Lord will come as a thief. Well, doesn't Jesus talk about him coming as a thief in Revelation 16, right? Blessed are those who watch, for behold, I come as a thief. Blessed are those who watch. They'll not be ashamed. Paul talks about the day of the Lord coming as a thief in the night. So the day of the Lord, it's going to certainly begin as a thief in the night. That's the moment, the day that Jesus comes back. That's when he intervenes into human affairs, into this earth, into this domain, and that's what we would call the end of this age. Okay, or certainly the very tail end. Okay, a little transition period there, but maybe that transition is a few hours, maybe it's a few days, maybe it's 10 days. Who knows? I don't know exactly, but we're not talking about a lot of time. We're talking maybe 10 days at most. Okay.
Well,
So it's in this day that the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved in the earth, and the works that are done on it will be exposed. What's he talking about here? When Jesus comes back, Paul talks about this in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. He says, when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven, unveiled with his mighty angels in flaming fire, inflicting vengeance on those who do not know God. All right, so he's coming back in flaming fire. We see this again and again. The day of the Lord is going to be with fire, and he's going to have these chariots, and the elements are going to melt. Why? Because the veil between heaven and earth is going to pass away. And here comes Jesus. He's fiery. The earth at that point will still be corrupted. And so when the fiery, holy, awesome God comes in contact with earth that has the element of death in it, the law of death in it, well, guess what? The two they're not doing so well together. Like when God came down on Mount Sinai, it says that the mountain was burning because God in his fiery essence had come down upon it. And that is what is going to happen to the earth. So the earth is already trashed. We know there's going to be the waters will have turned to blood. All the towers are going to fall. We know that the mountains are going to be thrown down. It's going to be a crazy mess. So yes, there has to be a restoration of this planet toward the beginning of the millennium. I don't know that it's going to all happen in a nanosecond. It may happen over in a process. That's very possible. But at least the beginning of the restoration and the renewing of the planet is going to begin. I tend to think it'll be fairly quick, but again, I'm not going to bet any money on that. But the new heavens and the new earth, in other words, that element of death is removed, and now we get to live on this beautiful planet. And now God's presence can be here without destroying the planet itself.
It's fine by me. I mean, again, it is a big jigsaw puzzle, and my current understanding may be wrong, but it and again, I think the key being it's the renewing of the heavens and the earth as opposed to brand new.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, brand new would mean this current earth and the current heavens are done away with.
Mm-hmm.
And I you've got all these other passages, because again, someone could look at this and go, see, there's going to be no millennium, there's going to be nothing going on after this day of the Lord, but they're looking at this day of the Lord as a one-day event. They're ignoring verse 8. A day is just as 1,000 years, 1,000 years just as a day. You have all these, that I think the very first time I ever talked to you, I went through all the, or many of the scriptures. Messiah 2030 went through an additional probably 20 or 30. But this understanding of a 7-day redemptive plan starts in Genesis and goes all the way to Revelation. I mean, I'm not dogmatic on it, but that is the type. I mean, my son yesterday was just talking about King Josiah, and so I was able to share with him, yeah, he was the baby king. He was hidden from Athaliah, who made Jezebel look like a sweetheart, who wanted to run around and kill and eliminate those of the line of David so that the covenant could not be fulfilled through Yeshua. And the baby king was hidden for 6 years. And in the 7th year, he was revealed. And the harlot, Athaliah, was judged and killed. So you see these patterns of this, the 7th day and the 3rd day, and all through Scripture. So that's why. Yeah. It's one reason I'm not dogmatic, but one reason I think we're approaching the end of the age, unless our calendar's really whacked out, or this theory, this thesis is simply wrong. So
well, we'll find out. We'll see.
Soon in the next, next 6, 7, 8, 9 years, the theory is wrong, or else, maybe Ken Johnson is right. He's calculated it at from the destruction of the temple. So I'd have to live to be 101. I don't think that would happen.
Not even sure if we want that to happen, right? Yeah. All right. So it also says, and the sea was no more. Now, this is a really interesting one, because when we look at Ezekiel, it talks about this river, the river of life, that's going out from the threshold of the temple, and it's going to go down. Let's go there. And it talks about everything it touches will be restored. It'll come back to life. So again, this is one of the things that I kept looking at as I was trying to understand this thing. So he says, he brought me back to the door of the temple, and behold, water was issuing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar. Then he brought me out by the way of the north gate, etc. Gave me this measuring line. Got all this water. It's knee deep. Then it's up to his waist. Son of man, have you seen this? And goes back to the river. There's many trees on either side. And he says, this water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah and enters the sea. When the water flows into the sea, the waters will become fresh. This is restoring the earth. Look at that. Wherever the river goes, every living creature that swarms will live. And there will be very many fish, for this water goes there, that the waters of the sea may become fresh. So everything will live where the river goes. Fishermen will stay. Right. And now look at here. And on the banks, on both sides of the river, there will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor their fruit fail, but they will bear fresh fruit every month, because the water for them flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. Okay, so we have to go to Revelation 22 really quick here. Then the angel showed me the river of water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, and through the middle of the street of the city, also on the other side of the river, the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. We just heard that. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And so this is where I was getting to in all of my studies, and I was trying to put this together. And I'm like, wait a second. Revelation 22 sounds exactly like Ezekiel
Because it is.
47, because it is the same. It is the same. Right. But I had been told that it wasn't the same. I'd been told that all that
Really?
Old Testament yeah. I'd been told that all that was that's for the Jews, or that's maybe millennial stuff. It has nothing to do with Revelation 21 and 22.
Because
And it's
this is
amazing when
only for the church. This is in the heaven. Is that what you were told, that this is stuff only for the church?
well, just that, because all Revelation 21 and 22 are supposed to happen after the 1,000 years in the eternal state.
Okay. I see
Right.
what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I could look at
they're trying to fit that square box of Ezekiel into the millennium. So they're ignoring the identical verses in Isaiah 65, practically the identical thing that's
same thing. Yeah.
in Ezekiel. You've got to do, again, you have to do hermeneutical gymnastics when you're taught a system and now you're trying to defend the system.
Yep.
That's what you did for years.
That's what I did for years.
Defended the system that you were taught.
Well, because I thought it was, gospel truth, right?
But
And
you
so
didn't
then
know any better. You were just ignorant, and you were gullible, and you were deceived. I mean, that's again, it takes some humility to go, you know what?
Yeah.
I got indoctrinated into a partial. It's a partial lie. Again, dispensationalism to me still sounds better than Amel/replacement theology.
Yeah.
Because they have to ignore more verses.
It's true.
No, they have to. They have a lot more hermeneutical gymnastics than does. It's almost like Yah used the Jesuits to come up with a little bit of truth on both sides, but they hid it all. It's like part of their counter reformation. They invented, if you study this out, Darby didn't just pop up out of nowhere. I mean, he systemized this, but heavily influenced by the Jesuits that, they're like Rome CIA, infiltrating the church system. I mean, you're seeing it now. I was tired this evening. I was taking a nap, but I put on Walter Veith and just, you've got Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, talking about, establishing a Christian nation, but he's at a Catholic conference. Getting back in bed with mama. So you see this happening. It's not good. I do not want to live under Christian nationalism or a Christian theocracy. No.
I agree with you.
My head would probably be cut off, or burned at the stake eventually.
Yeah, sadly, a lot of people are pushing for that, and it's the only time I want a theocracy is when Jesus himself is ruling.
Him on the throne.
Only time.
His Torah, his law, his statutes, his
iron rule. I'm good with that, but anybody else? No, thank you.
No, because absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, look at John Calvin in Geneva. I mean, that didn't turn out well for a lot of people that were burned at the stake because God told them to. I mean, no, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, bad stuff.
They were predestined to get burned.
Apparently. Yeah, so I was looking at Revelation 22:14. Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and that they may enter the city by the gate, outside of the dogs and sorcerers, sexually immoral, murderers, idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. And I was like, wait a second. If we are in the eternal state, as I've been told my whole life, we're in the eternal state, everything is hunky-dory, how in the world can there be people who are outside who are described as these kinds of people, and they don't get to go in to the gates of the city, and they don't get to have the right to the tree of life. And I was like, oh my gosh, Revelation 21 and 22 are not, they're not chronologically after Revelation 20, chapter 20. They're placed after 20 in the book, yes. But insofar as what is happening chronologically is happening within the context of Revelation 20. And that's how I started looking at it thematically instead of chronologically. And
Well, and I
yeah,
don't think I don't definitely you cannot. I believe it's chiastic. I believe everything centers back. The fulcrum of the menorah is Revelation 12. In other words, you have this crescendo building up, and you have this. It is thematic, but it's based on this chiastic structure. So you can't even if we differ a little bit on some things, and even if our brothers that are pre-wrath that view the seals and the trumpets and the bowls chronologically, it's still thematic. You still can't read it 100% chronologically and make it
right.
make sense when you start bringing in Ezekiel and
Yep.
Isaiah, and
Yep.
again, the Orthodox Jews blame the Christians for stealing the book of Revelation and say it's just a hodgepodge of the prophets and the Torah in one book.
Yeah.
And
It's true.
because that's what it is.
It's true. 100%. They're right.
But it's not stolen. It's the conclusion. It's the
Yeah.
revelation of their Messiah. They just
Yep.
don't know it yet. But again,
Yep.
Christianity's done a good job hiding him in Rome
Mm.
from
In
and
Roman garb. Yes.
Well, and
Yeah.
Halissa has an excellent teaching on that, how she'll point out that the rabbis say that the Messiah would be hidden in Rome from them. And they can't they
Mm.
don't make the connection. Wait a minute. So that Roman Jesus that they've been portraying, that's actually our Messiah. And I just wish more would
Huh.
read the Gospels and read Revelation, you know,
Yeah.
and they would see just how biblical the gospels I mean, not saying Paul's not, but I'm just saying just the gospels and Revelation, they would be making, especially those, they would make the connection to their Messiah, but again, they're going to be viewing this through that lens too, Doug.
Hmm.
They've learned the JC lens, the Jesus Christ lens. They've learned the Roman lens, just like Christianity has. We've learned a Gentile Roman Messiah. No.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I'm with you. Yeah. So, that was my little excursion into trying to understand this. Now, the last thing here, it says, "And the sea was no more." This one really perplexed me because we, as I just showed, we have water, right? The water is going to go down to the sea, so there's clearly water on planet Earth.
it's gonna be
In
fresh water.
and it's going to be fresh water, yeah. So definitely, maybe this is referring to no more salty water, no more oceans in that sense. I think that's entirely plausible. Another way to maybe read this is in Revelation, it says that God created the yamim, the seas, plural.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, if
Oh, possibly this
you
is
look at a
the
globe
Dead Sea
today,
is no more. The Dead Sea is no more.
well, no, I don't think it's the Dead Sea, but think about it. When you look at a globe, how many oceans are there? Well, we have the Pacific, the Atlantic, but
They're all connected.
you can sail to all of them in one boat,
Yeah,
right? You
they're
don't have
they're all
to.
connected.
They're all connected. So it's really one big, gigantic, contiguous body of water. So maybe it's that, because we know that things radically changed after the flood. So I would argue that the waters that used to be under the earth, that were subterranean, are now in our oceans. And those waters used to be underground, and now most of them they're on top of the surface of the earth, and they're the oceans that we experience. So we're going to go back to a pre-flood, obviously Edenic type world. And I would argue that we'll probably have large bodies of water, fresh water, and they will just not be all connected. That would be my hunch on that. So think kind of Great Lakes, but lots of them. Okay. And that's awesome because we all love water. Water is beautiful. And God's definitely into water. We know water is coming out of his throne. That water has to go somewhere, right? There's still basic physics that are happening. It's not just, you know, heaven physics and it's all different. No, it's still the general physics that we have, and water still flows downhill and fish still swim. And, you know, those things are going to happen. So all of that is still in this world that is to come. So there will still be water. So we just have to understand this little segment here in context. All right, verse 2. We're getting there, right? And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Well, in the last chapter, we saw that Satan is going to go out. He's going to gather the people, and they're going to be like the sands of the sea in number. And then they're going to go up and they're going to surround the beloved city. The beloved city is the New Jerusalem. It's the same thing. They're the same place. I want to take us on a little trip here. We're going to go down back to Psalm 46. If my computer will respond. There we go. All right. So God is our refuge. All right. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. All right. So God is definitely into the city. Let's go to chapter 48, and he talks about it again. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation is the joy of all the earth, Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great King.
Do you think
It
there's
sounds
going to
like,
be a geographical shifting potentially? 'Cause everything's going to get whacked, Doug. This is interesting
yeah,
because I've had
yeah,
people argue that the New Jerusalem is going to sit on the North Pole. No, seriously, they've
yeah,
done that,
yeah,
and this lady was
yeah,
not cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs,
yeah,
but she had went down, I think, some extra biblical books and things like that, and determined that not she wasn't one of these that was thinking that ancient Israel was Utah or somewhere in
yeah.
Africa. But I could tell I like her a lot, but we haven't talked recently. She'll chime in. She'll tune in every once in a while. I'll see her comment, but I can see again right now we've got the tilt of the earth. We've got, I believe,
Yep,
a lot of things happened at the flood. As you
yep.
just pointed out, I believe there used to be one landmass. I believe scripture supports that because in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because
Pangea.
Yah had
Yeah,
already divided the nations into 70. So what's
yeah,
going on there? The
right.
land being divided. And so again, I could see that with, we, this is impossible with a flat earth. and okay. But
Yes.
true due north, that's easy stuff for Yah. You understand what I'm saying? Especially if we go back to this, you could call it Edenic. You could even call it pre-flood, which we know the atmosphere used to be different, just based on the fact that the big old dragonflies, the insects, they can't fly in this atmosphere.
Right.
And
Right.
so I believe it's probably going to be restored back to that type of environment in which you have more regulated temperatures. That
Yeah.
perhaps it was that pre-flood environment, and
Yeah.
it's no problem on the globe, okay,
Right.
for New Jerusalem, to be
Yeah.
literally the sort of the due north center. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not
Yeah.
dogmatic,
No,
but I
I actually
don't think
proposed
that
this.
things have to. I don't think
I
that
pro-
things have to
I pro-
stay the way they are now.
I proposed this in Millennium Chronicles.
Oh,
So,
that's a shifting of the.
well, yeah, that so it would still be where we know where Jerusalem is today, right? To still be that particular
Yeah, I'm
spot of
not saying
land.
this,
But
but
then that would be then the north. It's entirely plausible that God could do something like that. It's not hard for God
it,
at all.
and
And it
what
would certainly make sense that it's the, the farthest sides of the north that would kind of solve
and
that
it's
problem.
like a capstone on top of the globe. I mean, and again, I believe we align. We haven't gotten there yet, but there's only two shapes that New Jerusalem can be.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
can be a cube or it can be a pyramid.
Yeah, we're
That's
gonna
it.
get there. We're gonna get there. Yeah, let's work our way there, because
I
that's
go with pyramid over cube, by the way.
I think definitely pyramid. I think it's hands down. That's the only way we could go. But let's let the text tell us. Okay, so we've got the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man." So this is where God has been dwelling. I get it. I know God is far bigger than any city. No question about
I
it.
believe that's where Yeshua would be right now in preparing that place. The place he went to
Yep.
prepare when he went away and
Yep.
returned this
Yep.
place. This is the New Jerusalem with many mansions. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
parable, but we're getting more details.
Well, and when the book of Hebrews says that he goes into the holy of holies, not of this creation, but into the heavenly one, this
So outside of creation.
that is in the New Jerusalem. When Isaiah sees God high and lifted up, and the train of his robe fills the temple, that is in the New Jerusalem. But it's going to get interesting, because it sounds like there was a temple or tabernacle in the New Jerusalem, but there's not going to be when we get to the end of this chapter. So that's a little plot twist right there, which is, of course, very interesting. All right, so the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. All right, we just saw that in Isaiah 65 when he talks about the former things passing away. However, in Isaiah 65, it talks about death, maybe. And here it
Well,
says death,
I believe these are for those that were in covenant. These are
Well,
they're the only ones that are. This is the bride. In other words, that there's no more crying for the bride. There's no more death for the bride.
yeah, I would agree with you. And at this point, only the immortals, the bride, whatever you want to call them, only those who have their new bodies can go into the New Jerusalem at this point. So if you don't have your new body, if you're still mortal on planet Earth, you cannot go into the New Jerusalem. We just read that in Revelation 22, that outside the city walls are the dogs and the sorcerers and all those folks. And they don't get to go in through the gates to get the river or the tree, the leaves of the tree of life, right? And the
Question:
leaves from the tree of life are for the healing of the nations. So
Do you think
something.
there's going to be couriers, like in other words, those that are the bride or the servants are currying out the leaves to the nations?
Well, no, I don't. My take on it is that in Zechariah 13 it talks about there's a river that will be open for sin and for uncleanness. So I think anybody who is mortal during the time of the millennium, I mean, first of all, if you're mortal, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being mortal. But if you're mortal and rebellious, well, there's a problem there. Okay. So there always has to be a heart change, just like today. There has to be repentance. There has to be that sense of contrition. And gosh, Lord, I really want to serve you. Can you be my king? Right. You are my king, but I'm acknowledging you now as my king. Right. So there has to be that change of heart before anything. And then once that is in place, then the person will have access to the river of life. And it's the river of life, just like what water does. What does water do? It cleanses us, it washes us.
Well,
So the river is going to wash the mortal of their stains, of their sins, of their decay and degeneration, all that stuff. And so once the moral issues have been taken care of and the water has washed them, then they will have access to the leaves of the tree of life, and that is when they can take them and then live forever. Because we
where
saw, where did we first see the tree of life? Back in the
in the garden?
garden, right? And God said, "Oh boy, man's now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now lest he stretch out his hand and take from the tree of life and live forever." And
Question,
God drove him out of the
question,
garden.
question for you in light of this: where is the third temple? then, in other words, the Ezekiel 40 through 48 temple, because it appears to me that that is sort of, that the Levitical system will be re-implemented. I say that because in Isaiah 66 it says, Yah's going to gather. He knows he's going to choose priests and Levites from the nations because he knows their DNA.
Mm-hmm.
There are priests that are scattered throughout the nations that don't know that they descend from Zadok. There are Levites throughout the nations that don't know that they, descend from Levi. I believe he keeps that might be the one example in the millennium where there's going to be like a genetic type of purity, and he knows who those people are. But where do you have that temple? Because it seems to me that those that are human, if it's contained within New Jerusalem, and you're saying they cannot enter into it, or do you believe that's what that's my question for you?
Yeah, I think the temple that is currently in the New Jerusalem is going to be moved. I think probably Jesus will move it. Jesus and Sons moving company will move the temple, put it on planet Earth. I think it will be somewhere outside the New Jerusalem, in vicinity to it. It won't be on the other side of the planet, but it'll be relatively close to it. And I think the water that's going to come down from the New Jerusalem is going to flow down, and then one of those streams will then go under the temple, under the threshold of the temple, and then it will continue down on its way to down to the
when we look at the size of the New Jerusalem, it's huge. So do you have it hovering over the earth, or is it going to actually rest? Because if it's a globe, it's going to have to somehow, it's only going to touch maybe in a certain portion landmass.
Yeah, I think that people have completely miscalculated the measurements. I mean, it says what it says. It's 1,400 stadia, or excuse me, 12,000 stadia, which is about 1,387 miles roughly. But here's the difference. Is that per side or is that in total? So when Herodotus measured Babylon, he said it was 32 miles. But clearly he wasn't talking about each side of Babylon. He was talking about the perimeter of Babylon. So if we use that as a model, then we can take the 1387 and divide that into the amount of edges that the New Jerusalem is going to have.
You're looking at the square stadia as opposed to.
I'm looking. Well, the way I look at it is because it's a pyramid, and a pyramid has 8 edges instead of 4. It's got 8 edges. And then I'm understanding that each edge will be one of those segments. So if you do the math, it's about 193 miles.
Well, sort of like you've got 10 by 10 feet. That's 100 square feet. So that's right. What you're looking at it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you have a cube, not that it is a cube, but of course that we're talking about volume at this point, but I'm not talking about volume, but I'm talking about the perimeter. So if you take the edges of a pyramid, if you tell me, okay, this pyramid measures, 1,000, 1,000 feet, whatever. Well, how do 1,000 like on each side? Or is it the perimeter, the base perimeter? Or is it the base plus the slopes, right? So I'm saying that it's this slope, this slope, this slope, and this slope, plus the 4 edges, that those are the sum. It's the sum of those that will equal 1387, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be smaller, in other words.
A whole lot smaller. But here's the deal. So 192-ish miles is still
pretty big.
Still 30 times higher than Mount Everest. That's huge, right? I mean, it's just enormous. But now it's Earth-sized. It's not moon-sized, right? This is actually something that could fit on the Earth without being crazy. But yeah, the way that it's been presented, often by the dispensationalists, is you have this gigantic cube, the Borg ship from Star Trek, and that it's just insanely big. And, you basically have a big ball, the Earth, and you have a big square, and these things come together. And of course, that doesn't work. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But when you understand that the dimensions make for a very large pyramid, but still something that fits, on Earth, it makes a whole lot more sense. But it's still gigantically big. I
On
mean,
a
it's
flat
still
Earth, would you be able to see it no matter where you are, or would it be like or would it be like the sun and get too far away?
well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, and that's the other thing is there's still going to be seasons, right? We know there can be months, right? That these trees are going to give leaves every month. There's going to
Well,
be fruit every month.
and I do believe it'll go back to as far as during this millennial period. I believe it'll go back to the 360-day perfect calendar and the 30-day month. There won't be
Yeah,
any. You won't have to do intercalary months or anything like that. It'll go back to perfection.
yeah.
I personally believe that's Yah just whacked the calendar out. At the time of Hezekiah, just totally said, "All right, I'm going to make this confusing for you people."
What I think God did is if this is the orbit of the Earth around the sun, I think God just went boop, and he expanded ever so gently. He expanded the length that the Earth took to go around
Mhm.
the sun, and it added just a couple days. I mean, it's the simplest explanation.
It's yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how we measure time. You know,
Yeah. So if the
unless you
circle is just a little bigger, right? It went from 360 days to now 365 and a quarter. And yeah, and probably part of that happened at the time of Joshua's long day.
I
Something weird was happening there too.
yeah, something strange. He did something there. Whether he did a freeze frame,
Hmm.
that could have been more like a freeze frame. Sort of like, I'm going to pause my timepieces. And everybody's like, "Oh no, you couldn't do that." I'm like, "It's his creation. He can do with it as he wants.
He could hit the pause button.
He certainly could. Like, I mean, it's his video game. He designed it."
That's right. Yeah, he can do that if he
Oh,
wants
but
to.
the physics. I'm like, you're telling me you can't pause physics? Hush. You're limiting Yah. You have little faith if you don't think he can pause physics. He created physics.
Yeah. And it seems like it would have to leave some kind of mark, right? And I think going from 360 days, and that just makes so much sense. Why do we have 360 degrees in a circle?
Because
Right?
it
I
used to be
mean,
a 360-day year.
and the ancients were not stupid. The
No.
ancients were really advanced mathematically. I mean, they didn't have calculus, but one guy invented calculus, Isaac Newton, pretty awesome, mind you. But the ancients had a lot of advanced math, and so they were doing amazing stuff. They were looking at the heavens, they were mapping it all out. They were very meticulous with their counting. I mean, they built the pyramids and without cranes and without computers. I mean, that's pretty darn impressive. So, and they're still standing, by the way. I mean, they're really impressive structures. So
And,
they did some
and
cool stuff.
and I put this up, Nathaniel. We're not disagreeing with you. We're saying that New Jerusalem is coming here. In other words, that in other words, this concept of floating around in the clouds up in the heavens of the New Jerusalem. No, I mean the text that we're going through right now says it comes down. In
Mhm.
other words, this is the place that's been prepared for us. So we're not disagreeing with you, but on this, again, it makes everybody feel good to go, "Oh, Mima's up in heaven now with the angels." No, she's rotting in the dirt right now. Okay, her spirit returned to Yah, no doubt. It's the spirit that gives life. When the spirit ceases giving life, you're dead, and then your body rots and worms eat it, and your spirit returns. But she's not up there floating in the heavens playing on harps and stuff. My dad right now is in the grave awaiting his resurrection. It doesn't give me less comfort at all, understanding that was the comfort Paul gave to those who had died. The comfort was, quit worrying about those that have now died that were in Messiah. The resurrection is coming. That's the blessed hope. The blessed hope of the resurrection, not the blessed hope of the pre-trib rapture, or the blessed hope of, oh, he immediately went to heaven to be with Jesus. So, but
Yeah. Well, we had a few people on to talk about near-death experiences, and I researched a couple hundred near-death experiences, and I don't know, they definitely colored my theology because
well,
you have all
again,
these
the
people.
spirit
Yeah,
returns to Yah.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. But
so
the body is waiting. The body's waiting, and there's something about being disembodied that is inferior to being embodied. So
now
yes, yeah,
the next embodiment will be better, though.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So however it looks, it's certainly it's going to be awesome when we
All right,
finally
let's
get
see
there.
if we can get through. What else we got? So yes, on this. Remember when we talked to Mr. Griffin, where he was literally saying, because he can't fathom that there's a covenant and a love story, and the whole from
Mm,
Genesis to Revelation. He had Yeshua marrying, because it says right here, Doug, just read it right here. It says, he is going to marry New Jerusalem. And so, again, yes, if you're hyper literal like this, Yeshua's going to marry a city. But New York City is not just its sewage system, its buildings. Doug and I have went over this before. It's the people that are in the city that make up the city. Each city has its own culture based on the people. New
yes.
Jerusalem, the bride, this is going to be that dwelling place for the bride, I believe.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And it's yeah, when we talk about New York City, it includes the skyscrapers. But what are skyscrapers and bridges without all the people, right? It's the people that literally made New York, okay? And without people, you would just have a ghost town.
Yep.
So it is the location. There's a place on the map called New York. There is infrastructure that makes New York iconic that we think about, but it's the people that have done all those things that make it significant. So when it comes to the New Jerusalem, to say that God marries New Jerusalem, well, yeah, sort of, but it's not just that God is in love with his own architecture,
Yeah,
right?
it's like I created a non-living entity, and that's what I'm gonna marry.
Right. But yeah, so it's the people that are housed in that place that he's in love with. That's the marriage, okay? And if you guys haven't checked it out, God's Divorce, I highly recommend it. It's a great book. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. Yeah, and so, again, the language here when he says he's going to take away all the tears, there'll be no more death. This is the same language that Isaiah uses to talk about how God is going to take away tears from their eyes, and there'll be no more heat hitting them. And it's going to be wonderful. But yeah, the Jews are right. The book of Revelation is not new by and large. There's a few things, but mostly it's not really new. It's kind of a rehash of what the prophets have been talking about, what God was talking about in the Torah, what David discovered in the book of Psalms, and other things. And when we take all of that together, we say, wow, this is just a beautiful capstone that's pulling it all together. This is kind of like your cliff notes, if you will. This is the compilation of all those different scriptures, and now it's made in a succinct way. But here's the error that I think a lot of people, especially our dispensationalist brothers, but others as well, have made when it comes to the book of Revelation, is they read Revelation isolated from the rest of the Bible. And you cannot do that. You have to take Revelation in context with Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zechariah, Daniel, the Psalms, all these other places that speak on similar things. And you've seen that's why we go back and we look at Isaiah and Ezekiel, etc., because that is how we can really pinpoint this. I call this biblical triangulation. When you have a cell phone, if there's three towers, the three towers can then triangulate your location because they're between these three. Then the little signals are bouncing off, and they're calculating how far you're from this one and how far you're from that one and from this one, and then that's how they know exactly where you are. maybe that's good, maybe that's not, but that's how they work. So when it comes to the Bible, we want to look at this verse over here and this verse over here and this verse over here. And that way, the one in the middle, we can have a better sense of what's going on. And that's going to give us a much stronger understanding, a stronger interpretation. It's going to keep us out of those theological weeds and weirdness, like he's going to marry just the infrastructure of the city, or Jesus is up in heaven slaughtering lambs forever. Weird
Well,
stuff. Okay.
Daniel put up Philippians, and we're not going to disagree with you, Daniel. Our citizenship is in the heavens right now. That is where our King is. In other words, currently on this earth, there is not a theocracy. We don't live in the land that Israel is promised, which would be from the Nile to the Euphrates. There is no theocracy right now. So currently, we are still in a theocracy, subject to a king, but while we're living in exile in Babylon, what all I'm saying is that heaven is coming to earth at the end of this age. In other words, heaven is coming to you. Yeshua is returning and bringing heaven with him. In other words, the entire from Genesis to Revelation starts out with God in communion, residing, tabernacling, visiting with Adam and Eve. That's the ultimate restoration. In other words, and that was on earth.
Yeah.
There, that was, he created earth, and that was to be the place for man, that he would tabernacle and be able to reside and communicate and walk in the garden with them. Same thing for the New Jerusalem. Just part about the New Jerusalem, Doug, as far as it could also still be sort of a hidden veil in this millennium,
maybe,
which is glory. It's no longer, it's more revealed to those living in the seventh day or the millennium, but it still contains, so they don't turn into crispy critters. It's like
well, I think that's
inside.
I think that's what the millennial sacrifices are going to be for. But let me just touch on Ezekiel 28, because we see this connection between heaven and earth. This is speaking of Satan. He says, "You were the perfection of signet of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God." Well, we've heard of the Garden of Eden, right? And then he says, "You were the anointed cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of the fire you walked." Well, what is the holy mountain of God? We just read about that in Psalm 46, 48, that it's a mountain. And that's why I came to the conclusion, and Scott has as well, that that the New Jerusalem is a pyramid shape, because a pyramid looks like a mountain, doesn't it? All right, a cube, it doesn't really look like a mountain. It looks like a box. But a pyramid, in fact, the first pyramids were created to be artificial mountains. A ziggurat that they were creating in ancient Babylon, those were designed to be artificial mountains. That was the entire purpose of them. So they are already mountainous in their architecture. I mean, just look at them. They look like a mountain, right?
What's interesting of these two shapes, you do see it in the pagan religions, but that doesn't mean that it started out pagan.
Right.
That the shape of the pyramid started out pagan. You also see the cube in Islam. You see the cube in Judaism. You see the cube on Trump Tower, by the way. On the top of Trump Tower, you see a cube. You also see an upside down pyramid in the architecture with the trees, 666 trees. So you see all these symbols once you start to understand what the symbols are. So you've got this cube. Anybody's ever watched 2001: A Space Odyssey? The cube. You've got the little cube. And so, the enemy knows the truth. He just won't follow the truth. So he tries to camouflage. He tries to
Well, he's also trying to recreate it down here, right? In Illuminati kind of stuff, they talk about as above, so below, which is ironically a biblical principle, right? Because Moses was told to instruct the tabernacle as according to the pattern shown to him, right, of the heavenly things, he was supposed to make a perfect pattern down here. And I think that is what Satan has been doing since the beginning, since the fall. He has been trying to recreate the new Jerusalem on earth with his own, counterfeit, whether it's a ziggurat or it's an Egyptian pyramid. He's been trying to create these on earth so that humans don't need to think about the New Jerusalem. They don't need to think about the Creator God who wasn't significant for a long time. You got me, dudes. I'm right here. You want heaven? Hello, here we are. And that's where we go in. And people were asking, why are we talking about all this Sumerian stuff? Because it has so much impact and far-reaching consequences and interpretation to this entire book. To understand our world around us, we have to go back and understand some of those things. So, Satan's trying to counterfeit, and he even called Babylon Bab-el, the gate of the gods. In the ancient Near Eastern text, it talks about Enlil, Satan, who was the bridge between heaven and earth. He was the connection point between heaven and earth. The ziggurats were called these stairways between heaven and earth. Remember, Jacob was seeing the Jacob's ladder, right? This staircase between heaven and earth. It's all been counterfeited by Satan and all these different edifices. But again, counterfeiting what? Well, counterfeiting the real thing, which is the New Jerusalem, which is, yes, a mountain or a pyramid. And here we're getting a taste of it. And when we get to later in this chapter, we don't have time today, but we're going to take a look at the dimensions. We already tease it out, but we're going to take a deep dive and look at those dimensions so that we can see exactly what we're talking about, and we're not just making stuff up here. But that's all coming.
Some quick comments, real quick. It won't take long. Yeah. Rick, I've said this before, talking about how many since then. There's been a lot of rapture watches. 1843, 1844 was big, 1987, 1988, then 1989. And then you had around the 2000s, Monty Judah still in ministry, but had predicted that, it's going to be the millennium. You had the Y2K. I believe it's only going to get more and more off the charts around Yom Teruah as more and more dispensationalists are actually understanding Yom Teruah. That's the good news, is they're actually starting to pay attention to the appointed times. But I believe this year is going to be like last year. In other words, there's going to be high rapture watch. I mean, there's rapture watch right now with Passover coming up. So the good news is they're starting to pay attention to the Moedim, the appointed time, the feast. The bad news is they're still clinging on to the church is getting raptured out of here before the Great Tribulation. So it's going to continue. I don't see it. Perhaps it'll stop for those that actually realize that it's not true after they see a third temple built or sacrifices start, and they're still here. Then hopefully, again, I would pray that they not think that the word lied to them. And I believe many might, think, oh, I've been lied to. The Bible's not true. No, the people that taught you this nonsense is not true. So, and this one sort of factors into some of the things I posted for Nathaniel. Nathaniel, I'll put your questions up, but again, I agree with JS. There's not going to be, sure enough, atheists. There's going to be those that understand there is an Elohim. They're still going to rebel, sort of like Satan, just like Adam and Eve chose to disobey, things of that nature. But again, you would have kids again on earth. Bible says in heaven, no man or woman. And again, once we receive our immortal bodies, we will be like the angels. In other words, Doug is not going to be able to procreate with another woman that's been redeemed and has her immortal body. Me and my wife will not be able to procreate, but there will be, according to Isaiah 65, there's going to be those of the nations, those whose bodies have not been transformed. Because in order for it be odd for someone to live to 100 years old, they have to be born and then they have to die. They cannot be immortal. The nations have to come and celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles if they won't reign. So there will still be goyim, those that have not chosen to immigrate to Israel. if you
Mhm.
choose in that next day, that seventh day, the millennium, to immigrate to Israel, where you take up residence, you you can become a Jew. You can become a Gadite or an Ephraimite or an Asherite. I think the only one you might not be able to go, I want to be a Levite. I think Yeshua has to select those. Isaiah 66 says he picks those from the nations. So, so again, I think all these are sort of related. Paul said, "Who will rescue me from this body?" Well, Yeshua will from this body, and then you will be in this new Jerusalem. It's just not going to be floating around in the heavens. You know,
Yeah, not in space.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeshua is invading this time. This time domain. It's going to be supernatural as opposed to it's limited right now. And again, y'all don't get too nasty. I will say this, Nathaniel: if you open doors by sin, by willful sin, or if Yah exposes a sin in your life, yes, you can be subject to demonic influence. But if you don't have the sin in your life, they have no control over you. Yeah, in other words, do believe believers, those that are sealed with the Holy Spirit, can sin, and then Yah can let something affect them. I mean, even Paul prayed for healing, and he did not get healing, so it didn't mean that he was demonically possessed. I've heard the anti-Paul people in the Hebrew uprooter community say, "See, Paul says he had a demon." No, it's like, no, he was not healed of something, and that way it would keep him humble. So, and again, no one has gone to heaven. Well, that's true. In other words, only Yeshua is the only one that's ever seen the Father, because he came forth from the Father. He wasn't birthed. The Father, Elohim, Yah, is not a hermaphrodite. He didn't have sex with himself and birth a son God. Yeshua was brought forth from the Father, the image of the Father. And so again, this is an example about we're not going, at least in the next stage, we're not going into eternity yet, where the Father resides. So
Yeah, and we may not
we
even
don't know
understand
much
it.
about eternity.
We don't know anything about it, do we? Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I think you
It's even,
start this one, last one.
yeah. Tshuva. Okay, tshuva, repent, for the kingdom is at hand, shall be with you. Yeshua, do you not know that you are the temple of Elohim?
We agree. Right
Yeah,
now, we are the temple, and we're not to corrupt this temple with what we eat,
yeah,
with
yeah.
what we expose our eyes to, with
Hmm.
even the
Hmm.
company we keep. I mean, we can't come out of the world. We should be sharing the light in the world, but that doesn't mean we need to go to strip joints or, go to bars and necessarily, there's just certain things that we as children of the light don't need to be exposing ourselves to. So, because we are the temple. And as Paul said, in Corinthians, he's like, kick that guy out, just like they would put an Israelite that was unclean outside the camp until they were clean. Paul was essentially saying, kick this professing brother outside of the congregation, turn him over to Satan. If he repents, he'll be restored back to the camp. I mean, nothing changed with the ecclesia or the church. We're still to apply those same principles, not judging someone's eternal salvation, but at the same point in time, if you had a brother in adultery or sleeping with his, with his son's wife, I mean, no, he does not need to be fellowshipping on Shabbat with you. If he's in unrepentant sin, he needs to be put away. So the church model doesn't really appreciate that, though, Doug, because that might be the guy that gives the most money for a tithe. you might lose some money on your building project or your salary potentially.
Yeah, Christopher asks, could the Great Pyramid be the altar mentioned in Isaiah 19? It's one of those theories that I think we can neither prove nor disprove. In Isaiah 19, it talks about the great altar in the land of Egypt, and some people have speculated that that may be the Great Pyramid. I have no idea. Maybe, but maybe not too. So That's about as far as I can go. Well,
right,
we got through a few verses in chapter 21. There's a lot more to come. Everyone stick with us. Nathan, stick with us. You don't have to agree with us.
Nathan's been around a while,
Okay.
I believe, or
Yeah.
Nathaniel. Yeah.
Nathaniel, stick with us. We're learning, we're going through. It's a journey, and you can be challenged. You can challenge us. We don't mind. And maybe you're right on some things. So cool.
Yeah,
It's
it's
great.
okay. I mean, I know I'm wrong on some things, and
Yeah,
if and
I've grown. I know that.
some of this is theory, some of this is thesis, some of it's speculation because it's yet to be fulfilled prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Yep.
we all see dimly.
Yep. Exactly. Amen to that. Amen to that. All right, everyone. God bless you. We will see you next week. And I hope everyone has a great Passover. So God bless. Good night.
Oh, and by the way,